Every morning, the team at the Exchange meets to talk over the top stories of the day. Here's what we think makes the cut.
Facebook, they're saying, yeah, no, if you guys want privacy, we can give that to you as well.
It always surprises me, though, that you can actually get on an airplane faster than you can check into a hotel.
If you buy on midterms, then there's some kind of positive reaction.
Facebook wants you to know your secrets are safe if you want them to be. Users can now access Facebook using a web browser that makes them appear anonymous. The service is called Tor. It's a browser that is also a privacy tool. It prevents people from learning a user's location or browsing habits. It bounces internet traffic through multiple locations. Now, as Facebook describes it in its blog, a person who appears to be connecting from Australia at one moment may next appear to be in Sweden or Canada. People who use Tor can include military professionals, journalists, business executives, law enforcement, anyone really that wants to keep their browsing private or is trying to evade censorship. That means it could come in handy in countries that block Facebook, including China. Its anonymity is criticized, though, for the potential to enable dark activities, i.e. criminal ones, like drug dealing. Tor has millions of daily users that Facebook could tap into. In our morning meeting, we wondered if this type of extreme security is the new way for companies to win over users.
There is a growing sense post-Snowden that you need protection on the web, you need to be undetected. And so this is Facebook kind of legitimizing people who want to stay anonymous.
If I'm the kind of person who hangs out on the dark web, I'm probably not going to go on Facebook. But they said that there are people who want both of these things.
It almost seems like a political statement to me from Zuckerberg to say, to the NSA, we're going to help facilitate a level of security.
It's pretty cheap and easy.
Political
PR,
statement,
right?
but also all these companies, this is what they're competing on now. They're not competing on features or users or anything like that. They're competing on, we have the most options for you to have secure data with us.
You either genuinely think there's a business there that they can grow in, or it's just like PR.
Meanwhile, hotel hospitality is changing. Soon service will be at your fingertips, and we mean that literally. Smartphones are the new room keys at Starwood Hotels and Resorts. That's the first chain to offer this service. Starwood says it'll make guests' lives simpler and give them back time. Other hotels are also going digital and cutting out the need to stop at the front desk. Hotel-specific apps allow guests to check in and skip the lineups. Time is money for the hotel owners, too. Hotels have been chipping away at the luxury services they offer. Last year, the New York Hilton stopped offering room service altogether. Some Marriott hotels are phasing out the mini bars. Free parking, soaps, and shampoos may also be on the chopping block at some chains. In our meeting, we discussed whether taking one more human element out of the hotel service could hurt rather than help the business.
The biggest threat to their business is Airbnb. And they seem to be responding to that by taking service away. And it just seems to me to be the wrong idea. The right idea to me would be to increase the level of service you get at a hotel so that there's actually some appeal in going there.
It's probably your middle hotels. Like you either go high end and you get all that service, or it's cost.
People go to Airbnb because hotels are too expensive, so therefore if you add more services and like better towels, that's not going to appeal to the people who are going to Airbnb.
Americans head to the polls tomorrow for the midterm elections. The big question this time around is whether the Republicans can take over the Senate. Uncertainty is not something investors typically like. If history repeats itself, buying now could pay off. A statistical consultant at Yardeni Research looked at the performance of the S&P 500 following midterm elections and found that buying on midterm election day is one of the best technical strategies he's ever seen. He went on to say the historical odds are almost 100% in your favor. He looked at the percentage change for 3, 6, and 12-month periods following midterm election days since 1942. The S&P 500 was up 17 out of 18 times 3 months after the elections. 6 months later, that was 18 out of 18. 1 year following, it was also up every time. Now, it wasn't a surprise to our team that the market moves could be linked so closely to what's happening in Washington.
I've seen this about more than just midterms, though. Any election. Because in the lead up, the investors don't know what the outcome's going to be. There's that uncertainty, so they hedge their bets a bit. And then no matter what the outcome is in the election, they've got that certainty.
So at least 2
they
years
start making
one
their bets.
less thing that's unstable.
Time for CBC's senior Washington correspondent, Neil Macdonald. Neil, I guess it makes sense that stocks would do well after this day is settled because people like the certainty of knowing what's happened. But will it matter much post-midterms in terms of what happens next economically in America? Are there going to be big changes?
Well, I mean, if the Republicans take the Senate tomorrow, then there'll be gridlock. And if they don't take the Senate, there'll be gridlock. I mean, as long as they're not running all three all three pillars of government, there's going to be gridlock. They've demonstrated that. It might make it a little more difficult to get confirmations through because that's the Senate's job, but really, no. And the Republicans are favored to win tomorrow.
So when you've been out actually talking to Americans and getting close to some of the races, what strikes you as most important about what's happening here? Because this does feel, as you say, like a little bit of a kind of deck chairs on the Titanic situation. The place is so dysfunctional already. What possible difference could it make if Harry Reid is Senate Majority Leader or not?
Well, I've been in Kentucky, which is the third or fourth poorest state in the nation, depending on how you measure it. And the thing that strikes me there is what has always struck me since getting to the United States, which is the extent to which people who are poor and getting poorer, and they all know they're getting poorer, are nonetheless willing to vote against their economic interest. Obamacare is very unpopular in Kentucky as long as you call it Obamacare. If you call it something else, then it's really popular because everybody knows they get more medical insurance. There's a lot of national myths built into voting patterns here, and one of them is anybody can grow up to be president, which is nonsense. Another one is anybody can get rich, which is increasingly less likely. Even Rick Santorum, even the hardcore righties are beginning to admit that upward mobility has stalled in this country.
So, and when you talk about anybody can be president, of course, one of the big reasons anybody can't be president any longer is the sheer amount of money that's required, not just for presidents, but also for these midterm races. Do people talk about that? Is that something that people are outraged by, concerned by, or is it even on the radar screen?
You know, it's almost depressing what people will say to you, Amanda. They actually haven't really thought much about that. A lot of them, you know, it's rude to say, but they have no idea what they're voting on. A lot of the votes are cast in the inky darkness of near total ignorance based on blind allegiance to Republican or Democrat, and that might be what your mother voted for. I had a woman in Kentucky say the problem is offshore jobs, is sending jobs overseas. We got the Chinese making all our bullets and bombs now, and they're just going to throw them back at us, which is crazy, right? But this is the kind of thing that you run into out there, and I actually feel sorry for politicians out trying to have quasi-sensible conversations with people. They see that, so what do? They lie. And they lie blatantly, and when the reality checked on it, they double down and lie some more.
Yeah,
it's a very negative campaign, but then it always is because that works, doesn't it?
It does work.
Wouldn't be doing it.
You've identified, of course, the weak spot of democracy and that it involves so many people. In terms of what may, I mean, you look at the map of America and the red versus blue. Is there any swing happening here? Are there any states that may surprise us? People that actually may go, you know, that may send independents to Washington and the like? Well,
it's possible that an independent will go to Washington from Kansas. He won't say who he'll caucus with. You know, in Kentucky, Allison Grimes, the Democrat, is behaving like a Republican, which is what you have to do in a red state to win. She's against Obama. She won't say if she voted for him. She won't say she's against Obamacare. She says she disagrees with Obama on guns and on environmental protection, and she is a Democrat. You have other states where there are some pretty tight races. There are, you know, Mary Landrieu in Louisiana, and the Georgia race will probably be ill-defined, so it may take weeks or months to find out what the real outcome of this thing is going to be. That's how close races are these days. And it's, as you say, a lot of it is because of fantastic amounts of money.
The bottom line, of course, speaking of money, is that America's doing relatively well. You know, we are seeing data point after data point that suggests you may actually get decent growth there this year. The jobs numbers look good if we believe them to be fully accurate and a full picture. Does that play in at all? Do people feel better about what's happening?
None that I spoke to. You know, in Kentucky, people are poor and they can see their real spending power shrinking and getting poorer. You know, they do know this, that, you know, it's an old aphorism, but the rich are getting richer. You've got to have money to make money. Wall Street's done okay, basically because the government made money free and allowed the banks to use Wall Street as a great big casino, and they placed some pretty good bets. Most Americans don't have enough money for retirement, let alone money to make big bets in the stock market on. So the answer to that is probably no.
And as you say, you're out there talking to Democrats who can be anti-Obama and anti-Obamacare. How large does he loom here? How big a deficit does he represent for the Democrats?
He looms huge. There's a lot of stories being done on it. The antipathy towards Obama is greater than the antipathy that you would expect. The 6-year itch. You know, all parties run away from their presidents at the 6-year point in a second term. But with Obama, it's different. You know, there was a fellow from the Kentucky Lexington leader I spoke to who said, listen, we can't pretend race doesn't have anything to do with it, especially in a state that's 88% white. There's a lot of Americans that have never gotten their head around the idea of a black man in the White House or a half black man in the White House. It's not something that is very polite to say, but it's just a reality in America. And Obama is not a warm and fuzzy individual. I mean, Bill Clinton is in Kentucky, was in Kentucky in the last couple of days, Hillary. Those people are still very popular. Obama doesn't, probably his biggest weakness is he never really inspired anybody. He's a smart guy, but you don't want to hug him.
All right, Neil, gotta leave it there. Great to have you with us.
Yep, thanks.
Neil Macdonald.